All right, just a quick one on the TSE300. This is the PDS version, suspension. So front forks are going to be 48mm WP Xplor copies. So they are nearly identical to Explorers. They use the same cartridges, they use the same outer tubes. The threads on the top of the fork cap are the same. The only difference is threads on the bottom of the cartridge are different from a WP. So you can't use the compression things from a WP that I know some people do on the Explorers. So that's the difference. It's the inner cartridge is different. But other than that, these forks are WP Xplor copies. Then as far as the shock, the OEM shock, it's been rebuilt, and then a 2018 or 2019, I forget, PDS shock. So they're the exact same length. They use the same length spring, 225mm spring, 415mm shock length. The clevis on the bottom is the same. The width on the top is the same. So they are identical as far as those dimensions. As far as I know, the only difference between these two shocks, really, I mean, other than the modifications that this one has and, you know, that kind of stuff, the real difference is this, the piston in here is, I think, a little, it's different sized from the WP, so you can't use a WP piston in this SCZ shock. But as far as I know, these bladder kits, like threads up here, are going to be identical to WP, because this is actually a WP bladder on here. So they really closely mimic. Oh, the only other thing that's different about the shocks, and China's been doing this for a while, thread pitch. So that's what I always kind of keep in mind, and that might be the only difference with the bottom of the fork cartridges, is they might just be a different thread pitch on there, because China loves doing that. But lower shock bolt, if you ever do change the shock on these, you do need a KTM bolt, because I probably can't see it on here, but they're most definitely different thread pitch. So since that's screwing right into your shock, WP shock gets WP bolt, SCZ shock gets SCZ bolt. That's just how it works. So yeah, nothing big here, not going over the suspension stuff or anything like that. Just wanted to go quick video on that. It's the WP Xplor. It should use the same seals and stuff like that, the same bushings as WP Xplor. I mean, there are going to be some, like, if you ever for some reason needed a new piston in here, not sure where you're going to get that from. So yeah, that's really it. Just a quick overview of the suspension, and got to get this new PDS shock installed for me. And one minor issue I ran into, which was surprising to me, was the heim joint. The diameter of this SCZ bolt that came with the bike is slightly more narrow right here than a KTM bolt. So this one I haven't modified yet. If I take this KTM bolt, stops. This one I modified, literally bored it out with a 15-30 seconds, just a little bit more. We're talking like 1/2 millimeter, but 1/2 millimeter, bored out of there, and they fit nice and snug with KTM one. Downside to this is, if I go back to this guy, it doesn't have much wobble to it, but yeah, there's more movement in it, and I wouldn't want to use these with the SCZ shock anymore. I'd have to probably get new ones to switch back to the other shock. And the other weird thing about this heim joint is it looks like it's greased. And every KTM one I've ever worked on is the Teflon bearings, and you don't grease them. But this one had a ton of grease when I pulled it out, so maybe it's a different kind of bearing. I mean, it's the same idea, stuff like that, but yeah, that's all. Just wanted to point out that if you do switch shocks, you're going to have to modify the lower heim joint, just so that's a little bit wider to fit KTM bolt, which you need because the thread pitch is different on the lower shock. Whew! There we go. I finally put this puzzle together. Anyway, GPX TSE300R suspension.